Welcome to this deep dive, everyone. Pull up a chair, get comfortable. I want to explicitly state right at the top that this audio segment is the second episode and part of the Tech Lounge podcast series.
Thrilled to be here for episode 2.
We are produced by AIQuinta, and our whole philosophy here is captured perfectly in our tagline, which is think with AI inside the era.
I love that tagline.
Yeah, it sets the mood. Just think of this as your relaxed kind of after-hours conversation where we explore the AI and tech ideas that are, actively shaping the world you live in.
And we really have a massive topic to unpack today.
Oh, we absolutely do. Today, we are focusing on AI and the Middle East war, but looking specifically at the global economic impacts.
Which is a very specific lens.
Exactly. Now, obviously, geopolitics in the Middle East is a profoundly complex human and political issue. But today, we are putting a strict ring fence around our conversation.
Right. No politics today.
None at all. We are looking solely through the lens of supply chain economics, tech infrastructure, and financial realities. We are absolutely taking no sides. Our mission here is just to conduct an impartial analysis of how recent regional instability has basically shattered this comforting illusion we all have of a borderless digital world.
And it really is just an illusion, isn't it? I mean, we've operated for a decade under this incredibly optimistic assumption.
Oh, for sure.
This assumption that globalized supply chains would always just be stable, that energy would always stay cheap, and that digital infrastructure was somehow physically untouchable.
Like it's magic.
Yeah, exactly. But what we are looking at right now is a fundamental repricing of how the entire digital world actually operates.
Right, because we talk about the cloud like it's, I don't know, like it's just this invisible, ethereal thing floating above us.
Just data in the sky.
Yeah. But the cloud is heavy. It's made of concrete, it's made of steel, and miles of fiber optics. It is deeply tethered to physical geography.
Completely tethered.
And to understand the economic shock we're analyzing today, you really have to look at where the data physically lives. So let's look at the Gulf region.
The boom there was just unprecedented.
It really was. Prior to the 2026 disruptions, this area was experiencing a massive data center boom. We are talking about over 70 active enterprise-grade data centers.
70, that's a huge footprint.
Massive. And beyond that, there was a $30 billion pipeline of new infrastructure projects actively under construction.
I mean, it was arguably the single most attractive destination for digital infrastructure on the planet at the time.
Why was that exactly?
Well, you had immense local wealth, for one, plus a really strategic push for economic diversification away from oil and critically abundant energy to power the cooling systems.
Because AI runs hot.
Extremely hot. So all the major players, Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure, Google Cloud, they all planted massive flags there. It just made perfect economic sense.
But then the physical disruptions actually hit major cloud facilities in places like the UAE and Bahrain.
Yeah.
And the fallout wasn't just local, it was immediate and it was global. Massive financial institutions, digital native platforms like Snowflake, they experienced instant operational downtime.
We're talking about massive outages generating tens of millions of dollars in combined operational losses every single day.
Every day. That's staggering.
And the immediate reaction is exactly what you would expect from the markets, which is capital flight. Tech giants are executing emergency shifts.
Just pulling out completely.
Pretty much. They're taking that $30 billion pipeline and redirecting it to alternative hubs. We're seeing rapid infrastructure pivots toward Southeastern Europe, India, Singapore.
Wow.
But that capital flight is paired with a massive legal reckoning, which honestly I find even more fascinating from a macroeconomic perspective.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because usually when a massive outage happens, tech companies just, point to the fine print in the contract.
Right, the classic legal shield.
Yeah, they invoke the act of God clause and just walk away.
Historically, yes, that's exactly what they do. Cloud providers rely heavily on force majeure clauses.
Right.
If a hurricane wipes out a server farm, the tech company isn't held financially liable for your enterprise business going offline.
Because they couldn't control the weather.
Exactly. But the legal landscape right now is aggressively shifting. Courts and international arbitrators are starting to view geopolitical risk in certain regions not as an unforeseeable act of God, but as a highly foreseeable, calculable business risk.
Oh, wow. So ignorance is no longer a valid legal defense.
Precisely. Meaning the cloud giants can't just shrug and say, hey, not our fault, we couldn't have predicted this.
That is a massive shift.
It is. They are being forced to absorb massive sunk costs, potentially issuing total refunds or huge service credits for these failures.
Which has to hurt the bottom line.
Absolutely. And as a direct result of that shifted liability, global insurance premiums for underwriting this kind of physical infrastructure are absolutely skyrocketing. The entire risk model has to be rewritten.
Which fundamentally changes the architecture of the cloud itself.
It has to.
For anyone managing enterprise IT, you probably already know the math behind this. It's the concept of the availability zone versus the region.
Yes, the classic redundancy debate.
Right. Let's frame the economics of this using a hospital backup generator analogy. So say you are running a mission-critical hospital.
Okay.
The first way to protect yourself is buying 3 giant backup generators and putting them in 3 separate rooms on the exact same hospital campus.
Makes sense.
If a local fire takes out generator 1, the others instantly kick in. That is a multi-AZ or multi-availability zone set up in cloud computing.
Right, because the data centers are physically close to each other.
Exactly. So the data moves instantly with almost 0 latency. It is highly cost-effective, and it protects you against, a random backhoe cutting a fiber line across the street.
It is highly efficient. But as we just saw, it has a fatal blind spot.
Right, because the vastly more expensive way to protect yourself is the multi-region approach.
The nuclear option.
Basically, this is where you literally build an entirely separate, fully staffed replica of your hospital in a completely different city, hundreds of miles away.
Just in case.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if a massive earthquake levels the entire first city, your operations automatically divert to the second. Obviously, running 2 distinct hospitals in different cities requires massive bandwidth to constantly sync the data.
And it is incredibly expensive.
Wildly expensive.
What's fascinating here is how these recent disruptions basically exposed the tech industry's massive over-reliance on that cheaper multi-AZ option.
And they got caught cutting corners.
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
During the outages, multiple availability zones within the exact same geographic region were knocked offline simultaneously.
So it was the equivalent of a massive grid failure taking down all 3 generators on your hospital campus at once.
Exactly. The highly efficient redundancy models failed entirely because the physical facilities were simply too close together to survive a regional shock.
So what does this actually mean for the bottom line of an enterprise company trying to run AI workloads today, like the actual cost?
It forces a permanent structural change in enterprise IT budgets. Chief information officers and procurement leaders are looking at these tens of millions of dollars in daily downtime losses.
And they're panicking.
Well, they are realizing that the vastly more expensive multi-region deployment is no longer an optional luxury.
Right.
It is now a non-negotiable insurance policy. If you want to guarantee uptime, you have to pay to duplicate your data across completely different geopolitical zones.
So that permanently inflates the baseline cost of global cloud computing for everyone.
Everyone, from multinational banks all the way down to mid-sized startups.
Which brings us to a really critical realization. It's not just the physical buildings, the data centers themselves that are vulnerable.
Not at all.
It's the microscopic raw materials required to manufacture the AI chips inside those buildings. The crisis shifts completely from commercial real estate to industrial chemistry.
And this is where the vulnerability of the physical supply chain becomes almost painfully acute.
Yeah.
We tend to focus on the software,
Yep.
on the algorithms, on the math. But algorithms run on silicon, and silicon requires a massive, incredibly complex physical supply chain.
Here's where it gets really interesting and honestly a bit mind-boggling to me.
The balloon gas.
Yes. We are building the most advanced, mathematically complex technology in human history, and it can be completely derailed because we run out of helium.
It's incredible.
Wait, helium, isn't that like one of the most abundant elements in the universe?
Yeah.
Why are we entirely dependent on one specific region for the AI supply chain?
It's a great question, and I know it sounds absurd, but it's the absolute truth.
Yeah.
Yes, helium is abundant in the universe, but capturing it, purifying it, and liquefying it here on Earth is incredibly difficult and expensive.
You can't just throw up a helium factory wherever.
Exactly. You can't just build a facility anywhere you want. The global semiconductor industry is currently facing a massive hurdle because of a sudden halt of production at the Ras Laffan complex in Qatar.
Because helium is a byproduct of natural gas extraction, right? And that one facility is the world's largest export hub for liquefied natural gas.
Exactly. And as a byproduct of that massive natural gas processing, it produces roughly 33% of the total global helium supply.
33%.
1/3 of the world's highly purified helium just taken offline overnight.
Let's use the race car engine analogy here to explain why this is so catastrophic for AI chips.
I like this one.
Think of the microscopic etching of a silicon wafer, like a high-performance engine in a Formula One car.
Right.
If you don't have a continuous flow of ultra-pure, highly specialized liquid coolant, that engine is going to overheat and melt itself into a useless block of scrap metal in minutes.
Just completely fry.
Yeah. When manufacturers build these advanced microchips, they use extreme heat to etch nanometer-scale patterns onto silicon. Helium is the ultra-pure cooling agent that rapidly transfers that heat away, so the chip doesn't literally destroy itself during production.
And as the Semiconductor Industry Association points out, there are no viable chemical substitutes for this.
None.
None. You cannot just swap helium out for nitrogen or argon. It simply doesn't have the same thermal properties.
Wow.
Without that 33% of the global helium supply, manufacturing assembly lines can't just pivot. They have to drastically slow down. The overall volume of high-performance AI chips being produced just plummets.
It's a hard physical bottleneck.
An absolute wall.
But the supply chain pain doesn't stop at helium. I mean, the Middle East is a massive hub for other essential physical materials.
Like aluminum?
Yes, look at aluminum. The region accounts for roughly 8% of global aluminum production.
Which you need a lot of.
You need massive amounts of highly specialized aluminum just to build the server racks and the structural liquid cooling systems inside these new AI data centers.
And sulfur.
And sulfur. They are a major global exporter of sulfur, which you absolutely need to make the ultra-pure sulfuric acid used to strip away microscopic impurities when you're cleaning the silicon wafers.
Which brings us to the logistical nightmare of actually moving these heavy physical commodities around the globe.
Oh, the shipping.
Yeah, it's one thing to mine or refine the material, right? It's another entirely to safely transport it to a fabrication plant in Taiwan or the United States.
Right.
The maritime blockades we are seeing, specifically in the Strait of Hormuz, are forcing the global shipping industry to completely abandon their normal, highly efficient routes.
Right. Ships carrying this vital aluminum and sulfur are being forced to detour thousands of miles around the Cape of Good Hope, all the way down at the bottom of Africa.
Which adds weeks to the transit time. But the delay isn't even the most disruptive part. The financial impact is what's truly staggering here. Shipping insurance premiums for vessels operating anywhere near these zones have reportedly multiplied by a factor of 12.
12 times.
12 times the insurance cost, just to move the raw metal that eventually holds the computers.
That is insane.
And in some cases, underwriters are refusing to cover certain routes entirely.
So they have to self-insure.
Exactly, forcing logistics companies to self-insure. These logistical costs are immediate. They strike directly at the bottom line of the hardware manufacturers, and they drive up the in-unit costs of all AI infrastructure for the consumer.
So you have paid a premium for the physical server, you've paid 12 times the shipping cost for the aluminum to house it, and you have somehow found the liquid helium to cool the chips during manufacturing.
Right.
But that massive upfront capital expenditure is essentially useless until you plug it in.
The power grid.
Yeah. And that's where the regional instability hits the tech sector a second time.
Because artificial intelligence, at its absolute core, is an energy business.
Yeah.
Computation equals electricity. You cannot separate the two.
And the recent disruptions caused a violent reaction in the global energy markets. We are seeing Brent crude oil prices surging 15%, pushing toward $120 a barrel.
A massive jump.
Because semiconductor manufacturing, and especially running these massive data centers, is so incredibly energy intensive, this oil spike acts as a massive regressive tax on the entire tech sector.
It really does.
Projections show this energy shock alone could increase overall chip manufacturing costs by 15 to 25%.
That 15 to 25% increase is staggering when you consider the sheer scale of the hardware required for modern AI.
Right, the numbers are already huge.
Exactly. A tech giant might be able to absorb that margin compression, but a Series B startup trying to train a new foundational model,
They're dead in the water.
they simply get priced out. And it is not just the logic chips, the GPUs, that are the problem. It hits incredibly hard when it comes to memory.
Let's talk about memory, because it's a huge bottleneck for AI. For our listeners who know the architecture, you understand the trade-offs between SRAM, NAND, and DRAM.
The classic trio.
But let's quickly frame the economics of this using a commercial kitchen analogy to see why the energy spike hurts so much.
Okay, let's hear it.
Imagine a massive, incredibly busy restaurant kitchen. First, you have SRAM. Think of this as the head chef's personal cutting board.
Right there at their station.
Exactly. It's incredibly fast, holds exactly what they need right now, but building that cutting board is wildly expensive and takes up too much physical space on the chip for bulk storage.
It is the absolute fastest memory, but economically you can only afford a tiny amount of it.
Exactly. Now, on the other end, you have NAND flash storage. This is the deep freeze down in the basement.
Lots of space, but far away.
Right. It takes a lot of time and effort to walk down there, so it's way too slow for rapid real-time AI math. But once you put data in the freezer, it stays there permanently, even if the power to the restaurant gets cut. It is cheap, persistent storage.
Which leaves us with the middle ground.
Yes.
Which is where AI actually lives and breathes while it's processing data.
Right. DRAM, dynamic RAM. This is the main kitchen counter. It is the absolute workhorse of AI processing.
It handles everything.
Yeah, but to make DRAM cheap enough and dense enough to hold massive AI data sets, like the billions of parameters in a large language model engineers, build it like a vast field of millions of microscopic buckets of water.
Okay.
To save a piece of data, the system fills a tiny bucket with electrons for a 1 or empties it for a 0. But because of physics, every single one of those microscopic buckets has a tiny leak.
And if we connect this to the bigger macroeconomic picture, that leak is exactly where the energy crisis hits the hardest.
Exactly.
To prevent the AI's data from just evaporating out of those leaky buckets, the computer has an active electrical system that must constantly, furiously sweep across the entire field.
Just over and over.
Checking the electron levels and refilling the buckets. This constant refreshing process happens thousands of times a second and requires an unbelievable amount of electricity.
So if we tie it all together,
Right.
you need helium to cool the manufacturing of the buckets.
Right.
You need aluminum to rack the servers holding them. You need sulfuric acid to clean them. And then, once they are finally built, you are trapped paying for massive continuous streams of electricity just to keep the buckets full of data.
Exactly. When global energy prices spike by 15%, alongside the rising costs of those raw materials, the baseline economic cost of simply holding AI memory in a state of readiness skyrockets.
It's just compounding.
It is a compounding economic penalty. You are paying more to build the system, and you are paying significantly more just to keep it turned on.
Which forces a brutal macroeconomic restructuring. I mean, this isn't just an IT problem anymore, it's a Wall Street problem.
Oh, absolutely.
We're seeing this cascading effect hitting global equities hard. Before these disruptions, emerging markets in Asia were massively outperforming developed markets because they were the ones physically building all this AI hardware.
They had a monopoly on the physical build.
Right. But when the geopolitical shock hit, investors suddenly realized that these Asian hardware giants were critically dependent on Middle Eastern energy imports and Qatari helium.
And it triggered massive institutional sell-offs.
Just a bloodbath.
The paradigm for investors shifted virtually overnight. It is no longer enough to look at a geographic portfolio. Financial institutions are learning they must literally map the physical supply chains of raw materials.
To really understand the risks.
Exactly, to understand a tech company's true exposure. If you do not know where your server manufacturer gets its sulfur or its liquid helium, you do not actually understand your risk profile.
And the tech companies themselves are having to adapt to survive this margin compression. We are talking about enormous capital expenditures here.
Huge. Look at Meta, for example.
Yeah.
They projected their capital expenditures for 2026 to be between $115 billion and $135 billion.
Billion with a B.
With a B. Faced with those kinds of physical infrastructure costs, these companies are having to find massive savings elsewhere. They are turning AI inward.
What do you mean by that?
They are aggressively using AI to automate their own internal human labor coding, quality assurance operations to offset the exploding costs of their physical supply chains.
So replacing jobs to pay for the servers?
Essentially, yes. They have to find margins somewhere. If the physical world is getting more expensive due to energy and shipping costs, they will ruthlessly optimize the digital world to compensate.
That makes sense.
But if we pull back and look at the macro level, this leads us to what is arguably the ultimate shift. The era of borderless, unconstrained AI growth is dead.
Wow. So what does this all mean for the architecture of the internet and the future of how these models are deployed globally?
It means we are entering an era defined by geographic risk, physical security, and fierce resource nationalism. This is driving the rapid acceleration of what the industry calls sovereign AI.
Sovereign AI. And the projections for this are massive. Sovereign AI could become a $600 billion market by 2030.
$600 billion.
Let's look at how that changes the game. Think of it using a digital passport analogy.
Okay.
In the old globalized system, if you were a major bank in Europe, you might use a cloud AI tool that processed your highly sensitive financial data in a server physically located halfway across the world simply because the electricity or the cooling was cheaper there.
Right, your data traveled freely.
Yes, but sovereign AI acts as a strict digital passport and border control system.
Precisely. Under a sovereign AI model, a nation-state looks at the extreme vulnerability of the global supply chain.
The helium shortages, the cable cuts.
Exactly, the shipping blockades.
Yeah.
And says, we cannot afford this economic risk. Our national economy depends on AI, and we cannot outsource that brain to a server farm 5,000 miles away.
So they lock it down.
They legally mandate that a nation's critical data is never allowed to cross its physical borders. The physical servers, the software code, the training weights of the model, and the power grid supplying the electricity must all be strictly located within that country's sovereign territory.
So if an international crisis severs the undersea internet cables, or shipping lanes get blocked, or a foreign cloud provider suddenly pulls out, that nation's digital brain remains entirely untouched and operational.
That's the goal.
But this forces enterprise companies to completely rewrite their data compliance protocols, right? A multinational corporation might have to build and maintain completely separate, isolated AI models for every single country they operate in.
That is exactly the reality we're moving toward. Nations are waking up to the jarring realization that relying on offshore cloud servers is a massive, unacceptable economic vulnerability. They're demanding localized infrastructure. And here is the cyclical problem. If every country now demands its own redundant AI infrastructure, the total global demand for chips, for helium, for aluminum, and for power multiplies exponentially.
Which just further strains the already broken physical supply chains we just discussed.
Exactly. It's a feedback loop.
It was just incredible to step back and look at the journey we just took today.
It really is.
We started with $30 billion of stranded capital fleeing Gulf data centers, which exposed the expensive mandatory reality of multi-region cloud backup systems.
Yep.
Then we moved to the microscopic level, where a sudden lack of ultra-pure Qatari helium threatens to literally melt the global supply of AI chips during manufacturing.
The balloon gas.
The balloon gas. Then we looked at the massive energy tax on those leaky buckets of DRAM memory. And all of it culminating in nations pulling up the drawbridges and pouring billions into isolated sovereign AI.
It's all connected.
It is. And for you, our listener, whether you are an enterprise IT architect, a knowledge worker, or a startup founder, this is why this matters to your daily life. The everyday cost, the speed, and the availability of the AI tools you rely on at work are not determined just by clever software engineers writing good code.
Not anymore.
They are entirely at the mercy of physical, highly vulnerable global supply chains.
It is a truly sobering realization. We have tethered the most advanced cognitive technology humanity has ever created to the most basic physical constraints of the planet.
Yeah.
And as we transition into this new paradigm of isolated, nationalized infrastructure, it raises an incredibly important question about the future of the technology itself.
Right. And I'll leave you with this thought. If every nation is now rushing to build these isolated, strictly regulated sovereign AI systems to protect their economies, will we eventually end up with fractured, competing versions of artificial intelligence? Will an AI trained exclusively inside the borders and infrastructure of one country actually think and solve problems differently than an AI built somewhere else?
That is the big question.
It's something to think about as you navigate the AI era. Thank you for joining us for this session of the Tech Lounge. Catch you next week.